Number 37 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. As per normal, I'll start with a few reminders. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. The proceedings will just make those who are actually speaking available, so if you're not speaking, you won't necessarily be on camera. And of course, screenshots are not permitted. We have a couple substitutions. So substituting in for Mr. Jouen, we have Faisal El Khoury. Mr. El Khoury, great to see you here at the Agriculture Committee.
Be here with you.
It's great to have new members join and be able to come on the best committee on the Hill. So it's great to see you. And Adrien Larouche pour Monsieur Parent après.
For Mr. Parent. After 6 in the evening, he will be substituting.
Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, May 30th, 2022, our study on global food insecurity. This is actually our last panel that we're going to be having, and I certainly want to appreciate all the witnesses that have appeared and those who are here today, and I'll introduce them. So as an individual, Dr. Michael Fakhari, I hope I'm saying that right, Special Reporter on the Right to Food with the United Nations. He's joining us by video conference. Welcome. From the Canadian Canola Growers Association, Dave Carey, who serves as the Vice President and Government and Industry Relations. Mr. Carey's in the room. Great to see you. From the Ontario Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association, Charles Stevens, who is the chair of the board. Mr. Stevens, welcome to our committee. And from Quorum Corporation, Mark Hems, who is the president, and he's joining us by video conference. Colleagues, you'll note that we have 4 witnesses. As we tried to round out our schedule, we thought it was best to make sure that we could exhaust the witness list, and that's why there's 4 on this panel. And we're going to get right to it. So I'm going to start with Mr. Fakhari, am I saying that right? You help me. You have 5 minutes. Over to you.
The H is a distraction.
Okay, perfect. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. As the UN Special Rapporteur, I am the eyes, ears, and good conscience of the UN system when it comes to the right to food. That means that the UN Human Rights Council has mandated me to regularly report to them and the UN General Assembly on matters regarding hunger, malnutrition, and famine from a human rights perspective. For the last 2.5 years, I have had a unique perspective on the food crisis. I've consulted governments and communities from every single region of the world. I've also directly engaged with over a dozen international organizations at the highest levels and at working levels. I've bore witness to how women face overwhelming degrees of discrimination and violence, all while having to feed their families and communities. In 2021, the number of children in child labor globally increased to 160 million. This is the first rise in 20 years, and this is mostly in the agricultural sector. Workers, peasants, pastoralists, and fishers are essential to making sure we all eat, but they've been treated as expendable. Indigenous peoples' homelands are being stolen, occupied, and decimated at genocidal rates. In light of all of this, last year, the UN General Assembly requested that I report on the food crisis triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm happy to share with you today some of my findings. I'm speaking as an international expert, but I should add that I practiced law in Ontario for several years before taking up this position. The ultimate takeaway from an international perspective is that there remains no international cooperation and coordination to tackle the food crisis. Without international cooperation and coordination based on the right to food, it will be very difficult to overcome the food crisis. I suggest that the UN Committee on World Food Security is the best place to develop an international plan for cooperation and coordination. Something to keep in mind is that this is a long-standing issue. Before the war in Ukraine and before the COVID-19 pandemic, hunger and malnutrition was on the rise. Even if the war in Ukraine and the pandemic ended tomorrow, we would still find ourselves in a global food crisis that would be getting worse. First, so let me get to my report. First, in my report, I identify structural challenges that make it difficult to tackle the food crisis. The structural challenges are a rising debt rates for all countries, a trade system, an international trade system that doesn't serve people's real needs, and an increasing concentration of corporate power in food systems. Second, I identify what can be done in the immediate term and what steps can be taken now to serve needs in the long term. As an immediate response, I recommend that governments build on what worked during the pandemic. Many governments are starting to end pandemic relief measures, but these measures provided proof of what is possible to realize the right to food. So my suggestion is make these programs permanent, do not end them. In the long term, I recommend all countries transition their food systems through agroecology. Agroecology is a practice based on science, on traditional knowledge, and on social justice. It is a practice committed to mimicking ecological processes. It treats the goal of enhancing biodiversity and enhancing justice as one and the same. I also explain in my report how governments can repurpose existing budgets and use their national food plans to devise a transition to agroecology. And this is through three things. One, to provide a just transition for workers. Two, to ensure strong land rights and genuine agrarian reform. And three, holding corporations accountable. And then finally, I explained why an explicit affirmation of the right to food is important. It is worth remembering that Canada has an international obligation to fulfill the right to food as a party to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and as a party to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. In simplest terms, the right to food means that everyone has the right to access good, healthy food. People can access good food through fair and stable markets or through access to land and natural resources. And importantly, the right to food provides a very specific international framework that enables international cooperation. I look forward to any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fakhri. I think I've got it right now. We'll now turn to Mr. Carey for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you for the invitation to appear. I'm filling in for our farmer chair, Mike Amater, who's actually down the road presiding over a board meeting as we speak. Global food insecurity is a complex, multifaceted issue. It involves geopolitics, socioeconomic factors, and armed conflict. These are forces outside of the purview of a farm group and to a degree even outside the control of the Canadian government. Today I want to talk to you about what I believe we can do from the Canadian farm group perspective to produce more food, feed, and fuel to increase our agriculture exports to a hungry world. We've not realized Canadian agriculture's full potential, and many of the greatest barriers to increased productivity are domestic legislation, regulations, and infrastructure, items that are within our control as a nation. In my brief time, I'll cover the top 5 factors that, if addressed, Canadian farmers would be well positioned to sustainably intensify their production and ultimately grow more products. One is transportation. We need to increase transparency and confidence in Canada's railways and invest in adaptive and resilient infrastructure. Take immediate steps to implement the recently released Supply Chain Task Force Group's report. The top recommendations that would benefit agriculture would be expanding the current 30-kilometre interswitching, revise the Canadian Transportation's mandate to provide the independence, authority, and funding required to deliver on that mandate, develop a transportation supply chain labor task force with strong agriculture representation, and increase and improve the supply chain data. It's all for naught if we can't move our products to market. Second would be around fertilizer. Next to water, nitrogen-based fertilizer is the second most important input to grow canola. Any reduction in fertilizer emissions must remain voluntary and focus on incentivizing farmers to adopt additional best practices to improve their already sustainable and efficient operations. Incentives for farmers must be made through the lens of return on investment to get the best results. Emissions reduction must also be measured on an intensity basis as farmers look to increase their yields using the same amount of land to meet current and future demand. We need to support Canada's innovative and sustainable farmers by focusing on increasing productivity, incentivizing best practices, and measuring emissions on an intensity and efficiency basis. Number 3 is crop protection products. Canada is a world-class regulatory system, and the products that the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, or PMRA, regulate have led to significant environmental and economic advancements on farm. These tools protect farmers' crops against pressures and disease and play an important role in canola sustainability. Effective weed control paves the way for conservation tillage, increasing soil health, reducing fuel use, sequestering carbon, and eliminating up to 750,000 tons of GHG emissions per year. The PMRA transformation agenda has created uncertainty and challenges Canada's reputation and commitment to science and risk-based assessments. Assessments need to be done in a timely manner based on the best possible science to encourage investment and adoption of the latest technologies to sustainably grow more canola and keep our farmers competitive on the world stage. We need to champion science-based decision-making and restore confidence in Canada's regulatory system and avoid taking a European Union hazard-style approach. 4, around plant breeding innovation. Plant breeding innovation will play an important role in farmers' response to global food security and climate change challenges. Farmers need access to the latest seed varieties developed using the latest technologies like gene editing. To benefit from these advancements, we need clear, transparent, and predictable guidance documents from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to be released as soon as possible. 5, around working capital. Like any farm businesses, farmers want to invest in their operations. However, the capital costs of farming are intensive, with most pieces of major farm equipment costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. CCGA strongly supports Bill C-234 and commends this committee for its work on moving that through committee stage on Monday. With no viable fuel alternatives and infrastructure in place for farmers to replace natural gas and propane, the C-234 provides much needed economic relief on farm. Will ultimately help the environmental footprint of farmers and their economic viability. Last piece of legislation I'll chat about is Bill 244, the right to repair, currently at second reading. Farmers also need their equipment to work in time-sensitive periods, such as during seeding and harvest. CCJ supports Bill C-244, as it will give farmers the choice of who can diagnose, repair their equipment, saving them critical time and money, and would help reduce prices by allowing for competition. In conclusion, it's vital that Canada focus on what we can do to to sustainably intensify our primary agriculture production. To do that, we need a legislative and regulatory environment that is predictable, science-based, and that fosters investment and innovation. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carey. We'll now turn to Mr. Stevens for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity there to present. I represent the Ontario Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Ontario, and Canadian food security in terms of our fresh fruit and vegetable is worryingly low. According to the U.S. trade in 2021, over 75% of Canadian fresh vegetables market and 80% of the fresh fruit were supplied by imports into Canada. However, Canada can play a tremendous role in combating global food insecurity for certain crops. For certain vegetable crops where we have a strong economics of scale and favorable growing conditions, such as greenhouse vegetables, we are significant exporters. In 2021, Canada managed to export $2 billion in fresh vegetables to other countries and export an additional $3 billion in frozen fruits and vegetables worldwide. A key to both increasing our domestic food security and our ability to contribute to global food security is strong agricultural policies. That's why we're here. For example, the Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council published a study in 2021 showed that labor shortage in Canadian farms directly corresponded to a $2.9 billion in lost sales. We're not the only ones that have a problem with this issue, as you know. Other studies of Ontario's safety net programs for farms shows that without some of these programs, 95% of the farms would be negatively impacted, including my own, by the way. There are just 2 examples of direct correlation between government policies and our ability to produce food for Canadians and for the global community. I have a few items here that the policies that need to be addressed to help us address this problem. Protect the temporary foreign worker program, including seasonal void that swap fills compared to other year-round programs. We lose this or it gets tweaked badly, we're out of business. Ensure business risk management programs are strong and accessible, and don't throw up barriers to programs rushing for new cross-compliances. That makes them not as
I apologize,
the uptake would be.
Mr. Stevens, I'm just stopping the clock. Mr. Patron, I know, was having a bit of difficulty with translation. I'll continue to speak in English. Can you hear me now in French in the translation? Okay, we've resolved it. Mr. Stevens, sorry to interrupt, but we'll let you continue from there.
Get farmers back to farming by streamlining government inspection processes. They are complicated, drawn out, and they take, especially the temporary worker program integrity audit There were 11 audits on my farm last year. When I started, there were none. And it doesn't help the farmer when he's under stress and harvesting his crop to have somebody come in and audit, and he's got nothing wrong, at the end of the day. It's just overburdensome. Establish fresh financial protection for fresh fruit and vegetable farmers in Canada to mirror the same policy in the United States by quickly passing Bill C-280, the Financial Protection for Fresh and Fruit Vegetables Act, because our product is perishable. We can't go collect it when there's a bankruptcy. Implement a grocery code of conduct to protect domestic farms from risk of anti-competitive practices by large retailers that are stretching family farms to the limit. Correct the competitive handicap for Canadian farmers due to the fertilizer tariffs by developing a fair and equitable refund or tax rebate program. Ensure farmers have the tools that they need to protect their crops by increasing funding to the Pest Management Center. That is not the PMRA. They got some dollars the other day, but the Pest Management Center is the tool that we use to get the new technology in crop protection to the farmers of the fruit and vegetable industry. That is the key big one, because without them, we're going down the tube. Very important. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Hems, you're online, but your camera's not on. If you could just, there you are. Over to you for up to 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the committee for the invitation to participate in today's meeting. I'm Mark Hemis, president of Quorum Corporation based in Edmonton. Quorum has been responsible for monitoring the Canadian prairie grain handling and transportation system on behalf of Transport Canada and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada since June of 2001. You all have my notes, I believe. I sent them in a couple of days ago, so I'm not going to try and read the whole thing to you. But as my expertise and knowledge centers on the logistics and supply chain of the Canadian grain industry, my comments today are going to be focused on how the global food insecurity can and cannot be aided by the Canadian industry. Global food insecurity has been a concern for many over the past number of years as demand grows with increased population and higher standards of living, while production and supply fluctuate with regional weather conditions and supply chain disruptions, be they weather or human caused. The Russian invasion of the Ukraine served to exacerbate this situation, and as such, my comments will cover both the short and long-term challenges that we face. In the short term, not unlike the impact the pandemic had on the entirety of the global supply chain, the Russian invasion of the Ukraine served to upset an already tenuous balance of supply and demand for grain and grain products globally. Using wheat production and exports as an example, the 3-year average of global production was 752 million metric tons, while the global export market averaged about 177 million metric tons. 4 countries made up over half of the global export supply: the Ukraine, Russia, United States, and Canada, with Ukraine and Russia providing about 31% of that supply. Most of those exports flow from the Black Sea port origins and supply the demand of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. General industry opinions suggest that the supply from that region is going to, or to that region, is going to be reduced by a half, if not more, for the duration of the war and for a period after its conclusion. In short, the global market's going to be looking for about 26 million metric tons of wheat that's lost due to the impacts of the war. Western Canadian wheat and durum production has averaged 28.9 million metric tons annually over the last 5 years, with an average of 3.5 million metric tons carried over. Domestically, we consume about 6 million metric tons annually, and the remainder, anything over and above that we grow, goes into the export markets, or about 26 million metric tons. There's a graph in the paper that I sent you that pretty much displays what that kind of balance happens. Now, Canadian grain companies and grain exporters have long-standing commitments to establish markets globally, many of which are second and third world countries. While the current year's Western Canadian wheat production volumes have returned to a level that equals the 5-year average, the total available to supplement the loss of supply due to the impact of the war is very minimal. Compounding this are the logistical challenges of supplying the regions that will be most impacted by the shortfall in supply, meaning the Middle East and North Africa. The logical routes would be through Thunder Bay and the Seaway or Eastern Canadian ports. But while the Port of Thunder Bay has more than adequate terminal capacity, it would require increased seaway capacity either through increased Laker vessels or an increase in seaway-sized ocean-going vessels. This would increase the cost of the movement as compared to the existing routing, which normally goes through the West Coast ports. A direct rail movement to Eastern Canadian ports would require additional rail capacity in terms of rail cars and resources, adding to an already constrained system. These constraints would need to be considered if you were going to think about routing the supply to the affected regional areas. In the longer term, though, Canadian grain production has enjoyed an annual increase averaging about 3% due to improved agronomics, while our domestic consumption has remained relatively constant. This allows for the potential in the future of increased exports of Canadian grain and grain products that will serve to help in the alleviation of global food insecurity. To serve that growth, grain companies in Canada have invested significantly in expanded capacity in their country elevator networks and the facilities of both the Western and Eastern Canadian ports. The challenge that's faced by all of the grain exporters, though, is getting access to the ports through the rail networks, as Dave has already mentioned. This committee has probably heard in previous meetings that on this and other topics that grain exporters base their sales and marketing plans primarily on what rail capacity they think they can obtain. The railway grain plans that are issued each August for the upcoming grain year do not reflect the level of increased production experienced already. So as such, access to rail capacity is and has long been a serious concern for all grain exporters and will continue to be in the future if the current conditions continue.
Mr. Hemis, we're going to keep it just right at that, if I could. I know my colleagues will want to ask more questions, and we're going to get to that right now. Ms. Rood, over to you for up to 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for appearing here today on this very important topic. I just want to touch, and I'm going to turn to Mr. Stevens. Mr. Stevens, I've had some great meetings over the last couple of days with our vegetable producers, fruit and vegetable producers from Ontario, and having been in the industry and my family for a long time, I understand some of the challenges that the industry is facing right now. And we are a supplier of high-quality fruits and vegetables to not just Canada, but to the world. And as you mentioned in your statement, we do export a lot of our greenhouse grown vegetables in Canada. But I'm just wondering if you could touch on the fertilizer tariffs and the fertilizer reduction that the government is looking at imposing on farmers, and what will that do to our food security in Canada? What will it do to our growers as far as being able to continue producing the yields and producing the great crops that we have, while we're seeing less and less farmers in the business of producing fresh fruit and vegetables in Canada right now?
That's a pretty easy one to say. This legislation or a policy has increased the cost to the farmer, and it comes out of his bottom line. When you do that, it reduces his cost to do innovation and grow their businesses and actually grow the industry, because it gets very tough when you have one of your key ingredients double in price in 1 year. I know it's probably more important to the grains and oil seed business. We use technology to implement, even in our horticulture operations, to put the fertilizer just where it's necessary needs. The technology is phenomenal how this is being done. I don't know whether the government understands how we are getting better and better of using this technology to help reduce the emissions And but it isn't a policy. As I say, it's a policy that actually takes dollars out of the industry, and you cannot do that. You gotta. We have a huge opportunity to be a key leader in agriculture in Canada. We've got water, we've got land, but we need policies to bump us up instead of taking us down.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing from those remarks is that if we cannot reduce our inputs as growers, we're going to become uncompetitive compared to imports that we would receive of fresh fruit and vegetable from around the world, where we can't control how they produce those and what they're putting on their crops and what regulations they have. Is that correct?
That is correct. And the fruits and vegetables, we are in an open market in the world. There's no protection for us at all.
And you're kind of leading into my next question. You touched on financial protection for those who are in the business of perishable foods. Can you just expand a little bit on that, just how important it is to make sure that we have mechanisms in place to protect Canadian growers so that they can continue to grow food for Canadians, so that we can make sure that we are food sovereign in this country and have food security in our own country?
On that one, obviously, the Bill 280 is in the government at the present time, and we would love to see that passed. And the reason is the United States protected us when we took fruits and vegetables and went into the United States, because they had their own deemed-like trust. That's what it's called. And they took that away because we weren't protecting them when they put product into Canada. So they gave us a slap, and we need to put this in so that we reciprocate and we have the same type of protection on both sides of the border. This costs the government nothing. It's a deemed-like trust. There's no money, but it puts agriculture, it puts my producers of an apple, that when he takes it to the States and that company goes bankrupt, we're number one on the list to get paid. Number one, over the banks, because that's the only way, because we can't take back that produce because it's bad by that time. We're really at a disadvantage. So this is a pretty simple thing. We've been working at it for 20 years. We have yet to get it through, but I would really, your support would be great. And at the end of the day, it will protect us every dollar, because there are companies that will buy produce, and this is done in Canada too. When you go to the food terminals in Montreal, it protects us from people going bankrupt and not paying the farmer.
And Mr. Stevens, one of the greatest costs that some farmers face is the carbon tax, and we've heard the tripling of the carbon tax, and we did just pass Bill C-234 through committee stage yesterday. Can you just touch a little bit on, and tell me, I'm going to ask you point blank, if greenhouse growers didn't have the carbon tax exemption right now, what would that do to our growers in that sector, and will this bill help fruit and vegetable growers in Ontario and beyond in Canada to help keep them in business?
In 10 seconds, unfortunately,
Okay.
but I'll let you.
All right.
I'll let you go, Mr. Stevens.
Okay. Well, the greenhouse growers, the carbon tax is huge on that industry, and we've got some protection on it, but it will make us uncompetitive again. We're only doing this in Canada at the moment, I believe, and the United States. The produce will come in, they will expand, we will shrink.
Thank you. We're going to go to Mr. Turnbull. You're online. Over to you for up to 6 minutes.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to all of our witnesses for being with us today. Mr. or Dr. Fakhri, I will probably have questions directed to you. I appreciate all the other witnesses, but I'm in particular interested in your role and your vantage point, which I think is very interesting to add expertise to this conversation. And I think you bring a somewhat unique perspective. So, Mr. or Dr. Fakhri, do the global trends in our food systems give you cause for serious concern when it comes to addressing food security?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Turnbull. Most definitely. I mean, as I mentioned, and I'll expand upon it, even if the war ended tomorrow, and the pandemic ended tomorrow, we're still in a food crisis. What the war in Ukraine did, and is to build on a previous witness, is it exacerbated existing problems. The reason the price fluctuated at first when the war happened wasn't necessarily a supply and demand issue. It was the problem was commodity markets. Commodity markets are sort of they're unregulated and they're really influenced by the U.S. commodity market in Chicago. Ever since 2000, because they've been deregulated, it allows for speculation. So the price fluctuation of the price of grain isn't necessarily reflecting supply and demand. It's reflecting fear and panic of speculators. So the market isn't working properly. What the international markets are doing is they're amplifying the problem. Now, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, is at a standstill. For 25 years, they're stuck on negotiating over the agreement on agriculture. So the consensus is that agreement on agriculture is outdated, but there's no consensus on how to move forward. So that's one of the structural problems. And then finally, the food system has been it generates about 1/3 of greenhouse gases. So the United Nations held a food systems summit last year in 2021, and the global consensus is everybody needs to transform their food system. There's a disagreement on how and in what direction, and that was my suggestion on agroecology. Is it will take a lot of work, but we have to start now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. So just in follow-up, so 10 years ago, the previous special rapporteur, Olivier De Schutter, visited Canada on a mission and produced a really great report, which I've read extensively for numerous years, actually, because I've gone back and reread it. And he said since the 1950s, Canada has been moving to larger scale input-intensive modes of production, leading to increasingly unsustainable farming practices and higher levels of greenhouse gas emissions, soil contamination, and erosion of biodiversity. He also noted trade liberalization in agriculture via free trade agreements has had the effect of decreasing net incomes for farmers and led to increased debt, as well as depression of farm gate prices in relation to input prices and the cost of living, which means that margins are constantly tightening, which are forcing farmers to raise production levels to maintain their income levels. And so he actually outlines this extensively. So I wanted to ask you, would you say that this trend of larger scale input intensive agriculture with corporate concentration, rising input costs, decreasing farm incomes, and rising debt, necessitating bigger is better, essentially, runs counter to a real solution for global food insecurity?
Indeed, I think I would wholeheartedly agree with that. And to give you, again, a specific example, the problem with fertilizers and genetically modified seeds, of course, there's an ecological problem. And we can talk about that. But from a market perspective, it creates a dependency on a shrinking number of corporations. So based on that report from 10 years ago till today, more and more companies are buying each other out. So that power is concentrating in the hands of the few. So farmers and people, sort of food systems more broadly, we're all at the mercy at a small number of people. And it's hard to break that small circle of power. But on the ecological issue, to transition away from fertilizers, it's not just a matter of emissions, it's a matter of soil depletion. Fertilizers ultimately deplete nutrients from the soil. There are techniques that are more regenerative, but that takes conscious choice and a strong policy to commit to that and to help farmers and workers transition. But governments have to start today to start that transition into the future.
Yeah, and you talked about resilient solutions. I know that on November 15th, I think you actually made a delegation to the General Assembly, if I'm not mistaken, or at least that's when it was published on your website. And you spoke to or pointed to resilient solutions such as localized markets, public food reserves, public food distribution systems, and agroecology. Could you speak and again contrast? Because I think what you're pointing to is resilient solutions versus solutions that essentially is business as usual and almost continue to exacerbate the vulnerabilities we have in our food system today. Can you speak to those? Thanks.
In about 40 seconds, if you could. Thank you.
Okay, will do. So no, I agree that business as usual, producing more by any means necessary is not the way to go. Generally, on a global scale, we have produced more than enough food. The problem is how do we produce? And so there are solutions to point. The report I provides those specific solutions backed up by science, backed up by policy, and by thinking, and it's already happening. The question is how to scale it up, how to connect all these different things, and how to both feed people nationally, but also to think in terms of how to export. There is an export dynamic which one can figure out, but we cannot continue business as usual. We cannot just sort of add more money to the existing problem. We have to, and we always have to think about power. Who has the most power and who doesn't have enough power? Indigenous peoples, small farmers, and workers for that matter. Thank you.
Thank you to you both. Maintenant, nous avons Monsieur Parent.
Now we will go to Mr. Perron for 6 minutes, sir. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses with us today. Much appreciated. Mr. Fakhri, let's continue a bit, if you don't mind. This is so interesting. You're saying that we need to protect the elbow room of small producers, small growers, avoid excessive globalization at any price. Do you think that Canada would do well to protect the supply management system for sectors that do use it, sectors that regulate their prices, their supply, and the quality of its products without necessarily disadvantaging the export of the products that are managed differently?
To agree in terms of focusing on small producers, but I would add, ideally, it's the small producers that are committed to practices that enhance biodiversity and also that respect human rights, so workers' rights, women's rights, indigenous peoples. And that's so it's not just any small producers. Those are the small producers that are the most resilient because what they do is they act as stewards of the land. Those are the small producers that I have in mind. And then to your point, I think what people have been demanding for over 100 years is stable prices. Historically, Canada has been really good at maintaining stable prices through systems of supply management. Now, today, I think one can advance in terms of thinking of stable and fair markets, not just as supply management. I think that still plays a role, and it's becoming more popular globally. But also in terms of strong labor rights, I think that provides some stability and resilience as well. And then supporting those local supply chains, I think, is also
Parfait. Je m'excuse, Monsieur Fakhri.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Fakhri, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you are saying that supply management is more popular now around the world. I understand that this is a concept that we might look to export rather than, taking it down. We should be exporting it, perhaps, to developing countries. This might help them have a stronger agricultural base without necessarily disadvantaging international commerce. Have I got that right?
Monsieur Perron, I think it's not just supply management, but stabilizing prices more broadly. There are a lot of tools. Supply management is an important one, and I think the Canadian experience is something that can be shared. But more importantly, is what is missing ever since the 1980s is an international system of stabilizing prices and supply management. From 1930 to 1980, international agricultural policy was an internationally coordinated system of supply management. Now, I'm not calling for another system of just supply management. I think in today's terms, we have to think of international coordination that includes an element of stabilizing prices through different means. But the idea of having stockholds of food isn't just supply management. It's a source.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm so sorry to be cutting you off like this. It's just that we have so little time, and I do have some other questions for you. Another thing that I found very interesting is the level of indebtedness of agricultural enterprises. If we wish to protect food security internationally, but of course within Canada as well, we want to ensure that our agricultural production is viable. You seem to be setting off an alarm bell about that, and I tend to agree. Do you think that our growers are sufficiently supported at the international level compared to what's going on internationally. And also, when you're talking about transformation, I think it's important, as you do, that we need to recognize positive behavior and provide incentives for that to growers. Could you say more about that?
You're on mute, Mr. Fakhri.
My apologies. Thank you, Monsieur Perron. Unfortunately, I can't speak too specifically to the debt level of Canadian producers. What I can speak to is the debt level of governments all over the world. But I do agree with your point. The only way transformation is going to happen, the only way food systems are going to transition to a system that is fair, stable, and sustainable is with active, explicit government support through incentives, through direct programs, through direct support. And it can't just be a hands-off approach that hasn't worked for the past 30 years. And governments around the world realize the only way you have a viable agricultural and food sector more broadly is with very conscious, coherent food policies that support the right kinds of producers.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Fakhri.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fakhri. Rapidly now, Mr. Perry, hello. Such a pleasure to see you. Always is. We're talking about debt. I'd like to hear you on that. The question I just put to Mr. Fakhri, basically.
I don't have the exact numbers, Mr. Perron, but on-farm debt is at an all-time high. Farmers are over-leveraged, certainly, and I think farmers' liquidity is also a big concern. Farmers tend to be cash poor. They have a lot of money tied up in acres and equipment, but when it comes to liquidity, on-farm debt is at an all-time high, and anything that would increase that would not be a good food policy.
And on direct support for an energy transition, for example, that sort of support?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, I'm sorry. And direct support, government support that can be offered to ecological transformation, environmental transformation, greening agriculture. Is it important to recognize the positive behaviors of our growers, and how should they be compensated?
Looking also for the credit for things that they've done. If you look at other jurisdictions around the world, even the United States, our level of conservation or no-till acres are far higher than the United States. I think that what we need to look at is incentivizing farmers to do more things on farm, absolutely. And some of that would be, offsetting costs when it comes to soil sampling is extremely expensive. The cost associated with custom and precision agriculture equipment is very high. So yes, but they need to be incentive-based. It needs to be a carrot as opposed to a stick.
Merci, Monsieur Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Carey and Mr. Perron. And now, Mr. McGregor, 6 minutes, sir.
Oops. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for coming today. Mr. Carey, I'd like to start with you. I'm glad you brought up the subject of fertilizer because we've certainly noticed a lot of confusion out there, and I think the way the government rolled its policy out, it didn't take the time to properly explain it. And I know that, given the volatility in the price, farmers are certainly going to do everything they can to minimize their use. We've talked a lot about the 4 Rs, and we can't really have food security unless we have farm security. We already touched on the high debt levels. We know the input costs are pretty horrendous for a lot of producers. In addition to 4R management, a lot of farmers are also leading the way with ecological intensification. They're really paying attention to the soil microbiology. They're paying attention to trying to mimic nature as closely as possible. How can the federal government try to put those farmers who are leading the way up on a pedestal to really try and get more of their compatriots and comrades to adopt the same practices?
Yes, thanks for the question. Absolutely. I mean, even if you look back 2 generations, when it came to weed control, it was you plowed the land. You tilled the land, you plowed the land. You had, anytime you had a drought, you had soil and dust flying everywhere. I think when it comes to the reality is that we need to make smart, sensible federal agriculture policies that allow farmers to be innovative and competitive on farm, because the cost of doing the things that we're speaking out here are incredibly expensive. For example, the cost of a precision agriculture drill, which when you're planting, you can plant your seed right into the stubble from last year. You're not tilling it up. You can plant your seed, which has been treated with the pesticide, so you're not spraying, and you can apply your fertilizer at the exact same time. So 1 pass of diesel, the cost of that is about $600,000. Our vice chair is with us from Central Alberta Farms, 5,000 acres. His fertilizer bill in 2020 was $316,000. This year it was $670,000. He anticipates next year to be over $700,000. as an example of that, he's being as judicious with his use of that as possible.
I'm going to continue talking. Obviously, we had a bit of a challenge with translation. We're good. Back to you, Mr. Carey.
So yeah, I think it's about incentivizing farmers to do the things on farm, and we need, if we're going to roll up money, farmers need to actually be able to utilize and deploy that money. The programs need to be operationalizable on farm.
Thank you for that. I want to get to Mr. Stevens next. Many years ago, when I was a teenager, I worked at a blueberry farm. I did it 4 summers in a row. And I can remember the panic that set in when you got those really hot weeks in July and you had to get the crop off the bushes really quickly. Your growers deal with the problem of food waste on a daily basis. It's a problem because of the perishable nature. So you really do have to be very efficient. You have to rush. I'm just wondering, I mean, we know food waste has always been a massive problem in many different sectors. In your opinion, what would you like to see the federal government do to step up and help your industry address this? Like, I know some members of parliament in other parliaments have tried to establish a bill with a national food waste strategy. Do you have any opinions or thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you for that. The blueberries that don't get picked go down in the ground and they produce the energies and everything. I don't consider it a total waste. It's a waste for people and their energy, for sure. But sometimes that's the fertilizer sometimes, so it's a waste for us as getting the food to eat, but as far as the product in the soil. But fruit and vegetables, Mother Nature doesn't give us any breaks. So you need our biggest bill in the fruit and vegetable industry is labor. And we need consistent labor that we can call on when the rainstorms come and we can get the crop off. So, and also there are machines now that pick the blueberries, but that's only for certain markets.
And I do want to just get one last question in.
Okay.
So,
I'm done on that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Dr. Fakhri, I'd like to turn my last question to you. I know you mentioned that the war in Ukraine and the pandemic exacerbated long-standing structural problems with the international food system. I guess I'm just curious to hear from you because you work for the biggest international organization there is, but 2 of its member states are actively at war with each other. And I'm just wondering it must be a bit awkward in the workplace at times. If you could maybe fill us in as to what that is like when you've got a permanent member of the Security Council engaged in a pretty brutal war right now.
Thank you for your question. So just to clarify, I am an independent expert. So it's a volunteer position, and I'm one of the few players in these rooms at times that can speak freely. So what I don't have in resources, I have in freedom. And I have been invited to brief the Security Council. And when I briefed the Security Council, I'm pleased to report that both the Russian ambassador and the American ambassador said that my remarks were fair and frank. But to your point, the problem what I find with the United States and Russia is they'll enter all of these multilateral spaces. I've been to the Security Council, the General Assembly, and the list goes on. And the one thing they always agree on is to not work multilaterally and to not commit to human rights. So even though they are enemies and they're at war and they're destabilizing everything, internationally, I look for leadership on for someone to come forward and push in these multilateral spaces for an international plan of coordination and cooperation. So, Canada in the past has played a role. I think it's an honest broker in the past. I think it can play a role today. I haven't seen that in these spaces, and so I just want to invite the government of Canada to really step up its international role and really bring people together on international cooperation and coordination.
Thank you, Mr. Fakhri. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. We now have Mr. Steinley for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And my first question will be to Mr. Hames, and it's just around one of the security issues I see is the supply chain. And could you just talk about how interchanging would be really important to make sure that we can get our commodities to market, and that interchanging would be a big would play a big role in that, and that's one of the recommendations that came from the supply chain task force.
I think the one thing about the interchanging and the suggestion or the recommendation of the supply chain task force really focused on getting movement of goods into the United States and into Mexico. That really doesn't address the global food insecurity issue, but it certainly does reduce costs, because now you're talking about having options of using different carriers rather than being locked in to this carrier, the rail carrier that serves you. There was an experiment a number of years ago that went on for 3 years. It was called extended interswitching. And in its last year of operation, it saved probably close to $15 to $20 million in rail freight costs to the people who used it.
That's perfect. No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. I just got 5 minutes, so I have a few more questions. Thank you very much, Mark. My next questions will be to Mr. Carey. And first is the PMRA has about 60 products that needs to be reviewed. If those reviews aren't done, what could be the effect on the food supply in our country?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, well, Canada. We represent Canada's 43,000 canola farmers that rely on PMRA. PMRA has been under-resourced and understaffed for years, and part of our calls have been on that. The concern that we get in direct response to your question is, as we look at their workload increasing, and then the also special reviews which get triggered anytime a Codex country makes a decision around a UNIC, that we are concerned that bad decisions will be made because they're rushed and they're under pressure and they don't have the resources. Huge concern. Crop protection products are amongst the most important thing to food security and to modern agriculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carey, and appreciate that. We've heard some interesting testimony today, and I would like to ask a question from you. You represent 43,000 producers. That's a lot of producers that have on-the-ground knowledge of our agriculture sector. My question to you would be, through innovation, through technology, like you talked about, zero-till, through direct seeding, through crop rotation, do you believe that the soil in Canada, the agriculture soil, is in better health now than it would have been 15 or 20 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. There's just no question about the amount of organic matter that's allowed to be built up in soil because you're not tilling it, because you're not having to get rid of all those weeds, because we have genetically modified crops that are herbicide tolerant, because we have products like glyphosate, save huge amounts of GHG emission reduction, and also allow farmers to plant directly into the soil. The notion that, the kind of American Gothic photo of painting of a farmer, that they were sustainable is simply not true. Agriculture on farm has never been more sustainable. Producers want to do the best thing, and I think, trying to identify good and bad producers is unproductive, but I think Canada's agriculture and farmers are directly tied to the land, and they have their money that is tied to the land, succession planning is tied to the land. So, yeah, on-farm sustainability and soil health, there's a continuum we need to improve, but it's never been better, and in large part to crop protection products, biotechnology, when we look at gene editing, as well as access to fertilizer.
Thank you very much. And I think the idea of trying to portray agriculture as corporate farms now isn't helpful. I know the average farm size in Saskatchewan is about 1,300 acres, and it still is a lot of people that they want the next generation to grow up in that farm, and they protect the environment and protect the soil because it's important to them, not only for their bottom line, but also to pass this on to the next generation. And I just wanted to get on the record as I think our agriculture producers are doing an amazing job, and anyone that wants to talk them down, I think they're heading in the wrong direction. I think Canada's emissions, agriculture emissions in Canada as part of our total emissions is 8%. And that should be something the world should strive for. And we are the gold standard when it comes to environmental sustainability in agriculture. And it's something we should be very proud of as a country and very proud of as a government. And I think everyone else in the world is around 26% emissions from their agriculture sector. And we are a leader, and it's something we should be very proud of. And thank you very much for being here today.
95% of Canadian farms are family-run businesses, 95%. Farms do get bigger because you need scalability. It's very expensive to buy this. You can't have a bunch of 100-acre farms with a combine on each one. And intensity in agriculture emissions, we're about 8% for the last 20 years, but we've increased the amount that we're producing with those same emissions by 50%. So I think I agree with you that we're on the right track out here.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you very
Carey.
much.
Thank you, Mr. Steinley. We'll now turn to Ms. Taylor-Roy for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to leave some time for Mr. El-Khoury, who would like to also have a question. So I just wanted to say I worked on a farm in the Holland Marsh growing up as well. I was pulling carrots and lettuce, and I know that it's changed. What we're producing now has changed because of trade and what we're competitive in. But, we talked a little bit about international standards and how we do things in Canada and the need to be competitive. But my concern is that if we go with the lowest common denominator, I mean, food safety and security in Canada has always been excellent. Like our food is high quality. And I guess there's two ways to go. One is to say, well, we shouldn't make improvements. We shouldn't be the best we can in terms of that because we're competing with countries who don't do that. And the other is to say something that we heard the special envoy from New Zealand say, which is that we actually have a superior product. And I'm speaking especially in the fruit and vegetable sector, Mr. Stevens, that we have a superior product in Canada, in terms of how it's grown, our food safety, our standards and everything. And we should be able to market it that way. Now, it's different in commodity crops, I understand. So one of the things I'm wondering about is, growing this food and trade, but let me revert a bit, because what I really wanted to talk about, too, was the land. So we need labor, but we need land and we need good soil. And those two things in Ontario in particular, I think, are things that are at risk. We have farms in my riding of Aurora Oak, which is Richmond Hill, which are disappearing, family farms, farmland. And some of them, the owners want rezoned, and they're saying the soil quality is terrible now after years and years of farming. So soil health, obviously, and having the land are two important things. What would you say to that, Mr. Stevens, in the context of Ontario and what's going on?
Thank you for asking the question. That's a great question. I believe in 100 years, there will be no agriculture left in Ontario. Statistics Canada did a census, agriculture census, back in 2016. 175 acres at that time was being taken out of production due to development and housing every day. Today, in 2021, the agriculture census, which is every 5 years, has put it at 319 acres a day. Divide that into the agriculture land, not just fruit and vegetables, all across it. We're out of production in 100 years. I know land policy is provincial somewhat.
Yeah, so what can the feds do? I just want to intervene to ask, because the solution, like, what can we do to help them?
We need better land use policies to save the number 1, 2, 3, and 4 agriculture land, which a farmer can make a living on, but the 5, 6, and 7, which he cannot make a living on, maybe that's where we need to put the houses. I know it's a pull and shove here. We need housing. Doug Ford, talking to him the other day, he says, we're going to support agriculture. And then he turns around and he says, we're going to open up the green belts to build more houses. So it's a crisis. We won't need crop protection materials. We won't need fiber. And those are the two key ones for the horticulture industry. And we have water. The rest of the world, we got a quarter of the world's fresh water right on our doorstep. And we've got climate. So
thank you so much. Yeah, I think it is a concern, and I just want to make sure that Mr. El-Khoury has the chance to ask a question as well. But thank you for that.
Thank you, et merci à nos témoins.
Thank you to our witnesses. My question is for Dr. Fakhri. In your opinion, how could it become a world leader for supporting the right to food on the international stage? Also, in the studies and research that you have carried out and published, have you taken into consideration the effect of climate change on agricultural sectors?
About a paradigm shift from food security to food sovereignty in order to remove the influence of those cartels who have influence on the food sector. Thank you.
So, Mr. Fakhri, we only have about 15 or 20 seconds, but I'm going to give you a little bit more time. I might shave off the third round just to be fair, but I want Mr. El-Khoury to have his question. So over to you.
Okay. Merci bien, Monsieur.
Thank you, sir.
What I can do is at the UN Committee on World Food Security in Rome, it can play a leadership role and bring countries together. We're all pushing now over the next few months at this Committee on World Food Security in Rome for it to be the place for governments to come together and negotiate an international plan. Canada can play a leadership role. It's been passive. It's been in the back. It really needs to, it can step up. To your point on the effect of climate change, the problem with corporatization isn't specifically farmers or family farmers. It's who owns the seeds. The GMO seeds are corporate owned. This reduces biodiversity. And who owns the input? Fertilizers and other inputs is also dominated by corporations. To achieve food sovereignty, to put the power back into the hands of producers, consumers, and everyday people, we need a resilient system that supports the small producers, the family farms, and puts power back in their hands. Seeds should not be corporate owned. Seeds are life. By patenting seeds and relying on genetically modified organisms, we're putting our lives in the hands of corporations and not in the hands of farmers. Merci bien à tous.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to move Monsieur Parent, 2 minutes.
2 minutes and 30 seconds, Mr. Parent. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Stevens, you have mentioned financial protection. I think you've dealt with that, but I'd like to hear from you. You mentioned 20 years, you see. Why hasn't it been put in place, and even though it would be so helpful? And before that, you mentioned labor. There being an important issue around temporary foreign workers. Do you have any specific recommendations to make to the committee that we can then transmit to the government, specific changes? And if not, could you send them to us later?
On the labor component, Service Canada, when we order our men up from, or the ladies from the islands, it used to take a month. We used to put our orders in. It was done in a month. Now it's 6 months. We have to organize 6 months to get it through Service Canada. Service Canada is not getting their job done in time for us to get the job done. And the other thing is the unions have put a lot of negative news out there because they want to unionize the 17,000 workers in Ontario, plus the ones in rest in Canada, so they can get the union dollars. They take us to court every 3 to 4 years, and we win every time. But we need to stop the negative things about what's happening. I treat my workers, and almost all farmers treat their workers as well as their local workers, or they'd be out of business. I have a man that's been with me for 34 years, and they're vital. We will not have a horticulture industry in Canada without this labor. So I do not believe what I know the government put an audit system on. I've been audited many, many times, never a problem. They may pick a little piece that there was a little thing that happened, but at the end of the day, it's not doing its job. Sorry.
En 5 secondes, pourquoi la...
In 5 seconds, why isn't financial protection yet there? Oh, I'm over? Sorry. Yeah, really sorry, Mr. Parent. I'm terribly sorry. Mr. McGregor now? Because unfortunately, we've already run through all our time. I'm normally as generous and very kind about it, but right now it's really necessary to move on. Mr. McGregor, 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Dr. Fakhri, I'd like to turn to you. You know, it was very concerning and sobering to listen to your opening remarks about the major increase in child labor that is coming about as a result of food insecurity. And, you know, I've actually been quite troubled by the role that international finance plays in this kind of exploitation. I know when I did some research, our own Canada pension plan has been found to have had holdings in companies that score in the low single digits on the Mining Watch index. We have also been invested in food and beverage companies which have forced labor somewhere in their supply chain. So in your opinion, like if we're going to tackle this, like because the forced labor, the child labor, how it's linked, but we also know that those people, they are at such a vulnerable state and they are just ripe for exploitation. So if you have any thoughts on how Canada can be a leader in combating that.
I'll talk in terms of policy and maybe leave it to you all to find Canada's role. But one of the issues that what often happens in these supply chains is corporations will rely on child labor, but because they're not directly hiring the children, they say, well, we don't know, we have no control. And that's not necessarily true. So I think increased scrutiny and corporate accountability across supply chains, this is the question everyone's asking. The other thing, the best way to reduce child labor is to support their families. No one wants to send their kid to work that way. They do out of necessity. So supporting workers, supporting families financially and with social protection, and ensuring that workers have the right to unionize. Time and time again, I've seen it across all different countries. When workers are able to organize and unionize, this provides them the social protection they need. This increases their wages, gives them job stability, gives them a safe workplace. They don't have to send their kids to school. So there is a direct correlation between the more you allow workers around the world to unionize, it reduces child labor, and then supporting through schools. And schools aren't just places of education. It's where we feed children. It's where we take care of our children. So support the families and support the schools is the best way to keep children out of work that way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McGregor. Look, we have a little bit of time. We're just going to be going to drafting instructions, so I know we're a little bit beyond the hour, but I think it's most important to hear from our witnesses. So, Mr. Barlow, no more than 5 minutes, but you have up to that time if you'd like.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. Some great testimony from some of our witnesses today. Mr. Carey, you talked about the importance of innovation and technology when it comes to improving yields in agriculture and soil health. Last spring, Health Canada deemed that gene editing was safe, but now it appears that the Minister of Agriculture has had some cold feet and has now paused the rules and regulation development around that. How important is that when we talk about new seed varieties that again help us in terms of food security, but also food sovereignty in other countries that would be able to use some of these new seed varieties for their own food security? How important is it to get this across the finish line?
From two perspectives, the farm perspective and the kind of competitive perspective is, so Health Canada has released their guidance around gene editing for food, but it also requires CFIA to release the guidance for biosafety and for feed. Typically, food is what we actually anticipated taking the longest. That's done. We are now, I believe, essentially sort of waiting for signatures for the CFIA two pieces, but there's three legs to that stool. So it's critically important because what's actually really interesting is genetic modification is very expensive. There aren't that many companies that do it. Dr. Fackery is correct in that assertion. It costs millions of dollars through GMO. There are only a few crop varieties in Canada that actually are GMO, so the vast majority of the acres planted are not. But what's interesting is gene editing is very inexpensive. So it actually, what we anticipate in the canola sector is we'll have more seed companies, smaller seed companies, startup seed companies that can use a CRISPR-Cas9 technology and to do things differently, which we think is really interesting is kind of the looking at could canola fix its own nitrogen? Like, could it become more efficient with nitrogen, more drought tolerance, more disease tolerance? So getting clear gene editing guidelines is good for farmers. It's good for Canadian innovation. We'll also see probably more startup companies. In Canada, there's over 200 seed companies alone, and we're a relatively small global market. But what is also interesting is that these will also potentially knock on environmental benefits as well. So getting that across the finish line, the rest of the world is there with the exception of the EU. Argentina, Brazil, South America, the US, Australia have clear guidances when it comes to how do I take a product from R&D to commercialization. We just need that clearly spelled out for the companies so they can invest here in Canada. So canola farmers have more options when they go to their local retailer of what they want to buy.
Thanks for that. I know Mr. Stevens had a chance to answer this. I want to give Mr. Carey a chance to answer this, and then I just had one question for Mr. Hemis. But a lot of discussion, certainly with a lot of the ag stakeholder groups here this week and the previous week, on the impact of the fertilizer emissions reduction policy. When we talk about food security, and can you just talk about when it comes to canola, what would be the impact in terms of lost production and yield, and in your ability to maybe meet your commitments? And if you reduce fertilizer use, what is going to be the impact on soil health and economic sustainability of your operations and of your members' operations?
Yeah, so for the canola plant, which is one of the best field crop for sequestering carbon too. But for canola, it's water and then nitrogen. Canola cannot produce its own nitrogen. It needs nitrogen. Nitrogen is the key thing that could yield. From 35 years ago, say canola yields in Alberta were 20 bushels an acre. Now they're 50, 60 bushels an acre by allowing the use of nitrogen. And there are other nitrogen efficiency nitrogens coming online. They're very expensive. They're not readily available yet. So there are efficiencies being made. But taking out a tool like that, an arbitrary target would be incredibly detrimental, not just to canola, to all sectors. Again, farmers is that innovation continuum. It's crop protection products, it's fertilizer, that allow for precision agriculture. That allows that when our farmer members are driving their combines, they're using GPS and GIS so that when they're planting the seed, the right seed goes in the right place with the exact amount of nitrogen. If there's nitrogen isn't needed, farmers don't use it because it's for canola farmers, typically their biggest bill is nitrogen. They do it because they have to. They're trying to become more efficient. But the knock-on effects of moving away from innovation, from GM, from biotech, from crop protection products are not good on farm for environmental sustainability. And farmers have choice in where they buy their products from. They certainly do, and they see value in it, which is why they sign technology use agreements to access biotechnology. It's not forced on them.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Carey. And I guess it's just, again, to that misinformation that some other testimony has given is that, the soil has these nutrients in it, like the Holland Marsh, for example. In many cases, the nutrients aren't there without the fertilizer. Like that is putting the nutrients there, which allows you to grow some of these products. But Mr. Hemmes, just a quick question for you. I learned today an interesting stat that out of the 400 ports globally, the Port of Vancouver is ranked 396 or something like that in terms of efficiency. We talk about supply chain, and I know rail is your expertise, and certainly appreciate your knowledge on that. But what needs to be done in terms of, and this is a big question maybe, but is the Port of Vancouver a critical pinch point when it comes to our supply chain and food security, not only here in Canada, but our role in food security around the world?
So, Mr. Hemmes, Mr. Barlow, of course, is right at 5 minutes, but I'm going to be generous and allow you about 30 seconds. And anything you don't cover, I'm sure you can put in writing to us. Mr. Hemmes, I apologize, Mr. Barlow. Mr. Hemmes is no longer on the line, so we don't have to worry about that. We'll go to our last line of questioning. That is from Ms. Valdez. Now, we did borrow a little bit of time with Mr. El-Khoury. I would say about 4.5 minutes, if we could keep it at that.
Thank you to all the witnesses who have joined us today. Dr. Fakhry, I'm going to send some questions over to you. Can you share with us how the Right to Food guidelines have assisted in closing the global food insecurity?
Thank you, Ms. Valdez. The right to food, if looking at the international treaty, but also there's guidelines, it focuses everyone's attention on, and we've heard stuff like this today, on the importance of sharing knowledge and technology, the importance of international cooperation. But most of all, it focuses on who has the power and who should have the power. And ultimately, I think everyone's in agreement today is ultimately the power needs to be in the hand of the producers, both the small farmers, but also the workers, also in terms of distribution, and then consumers. They should be able to decide what counts as good food, not just in terms of environmental, but cultural. So the right to food provides a very specific framework, and ultimately it's a legal obligation. It's not just a policy choice. I also just want to highlight the point in terms of why the right from a human rights perspective, and from a scientific perspective, fertilizer depletes the soil in the medium to long term. So you might get a boost in a couple of years, but also the runoff creates a human rights violation because we've seen it time and time again. It violates the right to health and the right to environment. It creates more problems in the medium to long term. So it might create a short term. So the right to food provides a systemic understanding, not just agriculture, about ultimately human existence in that systemic way, the food system from all points. Thank you.
Thank you. And you've provided several recommendations in your opening that can be done in the short term. With your expertise, can you tell us what the most feasible option you've asked for today that we can execute right now?
Thank you, Ms. Valdez. The one that I've seen that works time and time again is universal school meals for children, providing free, healthy meals for all children in schools without some system of choosing who's worthy and who's not worthy. And then to really make it work, connect schools to local producers that are committed to biodiversity and human rights. And that way you have a procurement system that creates a relationship between local producers and our schools. So we're both supporting local food systems and our children. I think that's we've seen this work. It worked amazingly in Brazil under a previous regime, and it's proving to work really well. It takes work, but I think that's one. And the second, in times of need, is direct transfer payments, giving people cash when they need it the most, not systems of vouchers or food stamps as they do in the United States. But what we've seen work is when people need access to food, give them money. And they know how to feed their family. They know how to spend their dollars. And that seems to work. Those are the two that jump out the most. I would also add finding ways of directly supporting local producers committed to biodiversity and human rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Turnbull.
You have just over 1 minute, Mr. Turnbull, for your benefit.
No problem. Thanks. Mr. Fakhri, thank you again for your testimony today. I just maybe will end on the fact that our Minister of Families, Children and Social Development actually announced today the public consultation on building a national school food program in Canada, which we haven't had before. I'm very excited by that and know that there's a coalition of the willing right across Canada that will be working on informing the build out with a federal government funding commitment that's been made. So, I think your testimony today speaks to that. I wanted to ask you more questions, but I don't have the time. Perhaps your report that you've mentioned several times could be tabled with this committee if you would be willing, which would then allow us to benefit from some of your observations and expertise, which I think we could all benefit from. So thank you again for appearing today. Really value your perspective and your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. I had sent it earlier, but I'll resend it again to make sure you all have it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fakhri. Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. I'm going to just exercise one quick question from the chair. Mr. Carey, we talked a lot about fertilizer and the fertilizer emission reduction goal by the government. I'm on record in the Globe and Mail and in the House, along with your thoughts, that this has to be a voluntary measure, which the government, I believe, to date has said is exactly a voluntary measure, but there is merit in trying to reduce nitrous oxide emissions. In the conversations that you've had through your many stakeholder meetings and the groups that you work with, has the government been really resolute in making sure that that is going to be a voluntary target? I believe Minister Bibeau is on record to say that it is, but I just wanted to see if that is indeed the case.
That's accurate. All of our interactions today with the government, including with Minister Bibeau today, we had at our board meeting indicate that it is still a voluntary target, and that is, we haven't seen any change to that. We do know that things change, though, but right now there is no sort of regulatory or legislative attachment to that goal. So you're correct in your assertion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Carey. Colleagues, that ends our session today, but let me say on behalf of all of you, to Mr. Fakhri, to Mr. Carey, and to Mr. Stevens, and indeed Mr. Hemis, who unfortunately I think had to drop out a little bit early, thank you so much for your work in agriculture and your testimony here today, very valuable to all of us. Colleagues, we are going to go in camera to be able to have some conversations to provide feedback to what we've heard from our witnesses both today and before that. So, Mr. Turnbull, please join us on the in-camera link, and we'll just make a quick switch over. Please don't go too far.
Thank you.